looked out the window, I saw the dust cloud, and the next thing you know, the car is rolling.
I hit the window and the girl next to me hit me and a suitcase hit her.
1 year ago, an Amtrak train collided with a dump truck in Mendon, Missouri. The images from the scene, heartbreaking. Train cars flipped over, people scrambling to get to safety.
I feel lucky to be alive.
Beacons of hope came in the form of neighbors and strangers rushing in to help.
We had to carry people, injured people, elderly people over there. But it was just this massive help session.
Ultimately, 4 people would not make it home that night. Tonight, we're checking in with the people of Mendon, the passengers from the train, and others whose lives were forever changed by that day. You'll hear about journeys of healing.
I want to make sure that they know that they are loved and that I hope they're doing better.
And lingering frustration over a lack of action to prevent a similar tragedy from happening again.
It would surprise me if they fixed it, I'll put it that way.
As we take a look back at the deadly derailment 1 year later.
Trains still travel along the rails where Tiffany Powers' life changed forever.
We thought that taking the train might be fun.
Powers boarded the Amtrak at Union Station in Kansas City with her mother, aunt, and grandma. They were taking a girls' trip to Chicago, but only made it about 100 miles.
It felt like it hit something, so it flew us forward.
Powers described the moment the train derailed near Mendon, Missouri on June 27, 2022, throwing her mother and aunt to the ground.
The train was sliding so fast and so hard on its side, the dirt and gravel just started covering my mom and aunt, and they were screaming, and I was screaming, and it felt like it was never going to end.
When the train finally came to a stop, gravel had buried Rochelle Cook and Kim Holzapple. Powers says only their wrists and hands were exposed.
And I swear I thought that I still felt a pulse, so I just kept digging and screaming and telling them I was going to get them out.
The 2 sisters from Johnson County, Kansas, died in the derailment. Powers and her grandmother survived, but now live with guilt, post-traumatic stress, and without 2 pillars in their lives.
Trying to find meaning in it. Some days are easier than others.
Her new mission is to pressure groups to address passive train crossings like this one. Through a law firm, Kuckelman, Torline, and Kirkland, Powers sued BNSF and others.
It's absolutely 100% preventable, and something needs to be done about it.
Even if something is done, Powers avoids all reminders of that day.
Do you think you'll ever ride an Amtrak train again?
Hearing the sound of a train terrifies me. Going over railroad tracks terrifies me. So we try to take roads that avoid any railroad tracks. No, so I will never be on a train again.
Charlie Keegan, KSHB 41 News.
The NTSB conducted a preliminary investigation that the agency released days after the crash. It showed the train was under the 90-mile-per-hour speed limit for that crossing. The train hit a dump truck that was stopped on the tracks. The crossing is considered a passive crossing, meaning that it does not have warning lights, bells, or arms. An NTSB spokesperson said last year that more than half of all serious crashes in Missouri happen at passive crossings.
You know, as we're talking right now, a train is actually going through this small town of Mendon, Missouri. It's been 1 year since that train derailment that killed 4 people and injured dozens more and put this small, tiny town on the national spotlight. Well, we are here 1 year later to see how the community has been affected and how the community has changed. The spirit of teamwork is always on display in Mendon. I mean, it's a town of 171. There's only so much you can do by yourself. When it comes to high school athletics, for example.
We actually have to go together in cooperative agreements with 3 other schools.
For softball, baseball, and even football teams, 8 on 8 at that.
So that's what we do in these small communities to have enough kids that, can field a team.
It's a small little town, but you're all a family in this small town. I love it.
The family atmosphere, the teamwork, that was arguably brightest during Mendon's darkest hour.
It happened on a Monday.
That day was very memorable. I don't think anything could have prepared me for that day.
I got the call from Sheridan County Dispatch that there had been a train derailment. They knew they needed to use the building as a triage center.
Eric Hoyt is the school superintendent.
I told them absolutely, please, just come to the school. I don't know what we need yet, but we could definitely use the help. And it was first responders, nurses, staff members, students.
One of the things I remember when I walked in here, I remember seeing first responders from the Columbia area. area from St. Louis, some from the Kansas City Metro, all making their way here to help out. What do you think that says about the sense of community here?
There's always a call to help, and whenever that call goes out, it's amazing how many people will respond, and that's what happened in our community.
Courtney Jessen among those who answered the call. In fact, I actually interviewed her live in between caring for victims.
And we had a lot of people come in here today with cuts, bruises, trauma.
Describe to everyone what the scene was like here a year ago.
Oh my gosh, it was chaotic. We had people going in and out. We had multiple ambulances taking people to different hospitals, live flight from all over. I remember walking into the gym and just seeing a bunch of chairs set up and people were getting name tags put on them. My adrenaline was just pumping that I didn't even know what I was doing, but I was doing it and I was doing it correct.
And just like sports, well, sometimes that's enough to carry you over the finish line.
It never really felt overwhelming. I think everybody was just so focused on, what needs to be done next. When you bite a big job off in little chunks, it gets done pretty efficiently, and we had a lot of people willing to do that.
Gym turned triage center. Some treated on scene, some airlifted to nearby hospitals. Amtrak and Red Cross officials working to find hotels for the other passengers. Do you all, as a school district, train for something like this? And if so, do you train for something this large?
Absolutely not. This is unprecedented.
Yet that event, the spirit of teamwork, has created lasting bonds. And as everyone involved reflects on the lives lost 1 year later, they also reflect on the hundreds of lives saved by a town rooted in teamwork.
I actually have a couple of people that reached out to me from the train, like a couple of families that messaged me 2-3 weeks later, and I became really good friends with them through it. So I kind of keep in touch with them, and definitely on this week I want to make sure that they know that they are loved and that I hope they're doing better. As an educator, what grade would you have given the town and given the school for?
An A+, absolutely. They did a great job. They really came out and did the right thing.
Coming up.
Do you think about the 1 mark coming up at all?
I do. It's one of those things that every morning when I go to work, for whatever reason, there's always a dump truck. And every time I see a dump truck, it takes me right back to the incident.
I spoke with many passengers who were able to get off of the train, meeting them at Mendon High School, a safe spot. They said once the cars filled with dust, the race was on to help each other get out. I spoke with first responders. They told me they had to bring ladders to help people climb off the trains, climbing through broken windows. The injuries and the memories were many.
I remember just how easy it was going.
Last year, Jason Drinkard and his high school students were all smiles at Union Station, not knowing that their day wouldn't go as planned.
As we tipped over, we actually hit the ground and it drug us. And so that's one of the things, the screeching, the crunching of metal, the gravel, underneath it and everything. That's one of the things that sticks with me a lot.
Even with a delayed train to Chicago, they believed their school competition trip would be waiting for them.
I think back to, just laying there in the seat, reading a book, and how, just enjoyable the trip was. And then how quickly it descended into chaos.
Do you think about the 1 mark coming up at all?
I do. It's one of those things that every morning when I go to work, for whatever reason, there's always a dump truck. And every time I see a dump truck, it takes me right back to the incident.
A hot summer day, 280 people aboard, a crash. The train went off the tracks. We talked with them after they got off the train.
My mind was saying, I can't believe this is actually happening, and everything else was just slow motion.
It was survival mode. The ground was not where it was last. Jason and his students had to find their way out.
I remember how hot it was.
People were burning their hands climbing on the train. More injuries and lives lost would come next.
I've never seen this before, to where everyone was trying to help everyone. I know I did everything I could, but I wish there was more that I could have done.
After the crash, Jason got certified in emergency training. He's becoming a medic in the Army Reserves. It's his response to how he responded that day.
One of the biggest things that I still feel when I think about last summer is just feeling how unprepared I was. I felt almost isolated because I just felt helpless. But because of that, because of the CERT training, I feel like I'd be better prepared to handle an emergency like that.
But what overshadows the crash, the blur of people in pain, the exit, what was clear? The generosity of the town of Mendon.
People you coming in, hey, how are you doing? Checking in on just ordinary people, not nurses, not doctors, not EMTs, just people coming in and turning out to make sure that you are okay. And that's something that I'm going to take with me until, I die. Just how great they were.
I'm Megan Abundis, KSHB 41 News.
Coming up, the crossing at the center of the deadly crash is still closed and without improvements.
I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for this crossing to get repaired.
The farmer who warned about the dangers of that crossing years earlier, and my investigation to what the plans could be for that crossing when deadly derailment 1 year later returns. I'm KSHB 41 investigator Cameron Taylor. 4 people died and dozens of others were injured in Mendon. Now I followed up with a farmer who brought up concerns about the crossing. He still thinks about that day, almost 1 year later.
It was so surreal just to see that, and walk up on it and know that this was going to make an imprint in our community, for many years to come.
We'll talk more with farmer Mike Spencer in just a minute, but let's give you some necessary background. Spencer was not the only one who spoke up. The Sheraton County Commission also told the state and the owner of the track about the issues.
We feel like we made up the contact with the people that we needed to let them know that there were problems.
The crossing is still on a statewide improvement list today. 3 days after the crash, I confronted Missouri's Department of Transportation director about why nothing was done beforehand.
We found out concerns about this crossing go back to at least 2019, and yet no changes have been made. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I can explain that by saying there's a $500 million bill and $7 million a year to fix it.
Since that day last June, there have not been safety improvements like lights and gates at that crossing. There is a solution here, but it's not one the farmer we spoke with likes. Mike Spencer remembers that phone call.
A train had derailed.
Almost a year later, he reflects at his farm.
It's hard to believe, yeah. It's time goes by pretty fast.
What's happened in all that time?
Well, not a lot. So we're going to come in here from the north side.
He's been down this road before. It's one of frustration. Around 58 trains per day go past this crossing at Porsche Prairie Avenue in Mendon. Most are freight, but 2 are passenger trains, according to U.S. Department of Transportation records. The max speed allowed, 90 miles per hour, less than a football field away from Spencer's soybean crop. When you saw that train come by just now, anything cross your mind?
Yeah, I'll be really careful.
June 27, 2022, an Amtrak passenger train on its way to Chicago derailed after hitting a dump truck. The driver of the truck, 3 passengers on board, died. The crash sent around 150 people on board to the hospital.
I was the one that tried to prevent the accident. I'm not the one bringing a lawsuit against the railroad. I'm the one that tried to prevent the lawsuit from happening. I knew it was going to happen. If somebody was hit there, that it was going to happen. And it did.
Spencer first brought concerns about the crossing to the county commission's attention at a December 2019 meeting. He raised several issues, including the steepness of the approach, the lack of lights and gates, and the brush. Spencer also alerted the Missouri Department of Transportation and BNSF, the owner of the track. Talks about safety before the crash never materialized into improvements.
It's disappointing that something had to happen that tragic to get the attention it needed.
This April, the county commission held a meeting to talk about safety improvements at railroad crossings. Pictures from that meeting show Porsche Prairie as a proposed closed crossing. Do you think that's a good idea?
I would hate to see it closed. I don't think it's a good idea to close this crossing. I don't think that's the answer to it.
Spare train tracks stacked on top of each other now block the crossing. Reminders of the derailment are still here, like this door from the Amtrak train. Spencer says vehicles like his truck haven't been able to get through since before that day. it's created another set of issues.
Our other field is about 200 feet away, and we can't get there now, so to go around to get to the other side, it's now 6.5 miles one way.
Not to mention, if there was a medical emergency, first responders would also have to drive around. Spencer hopes the crossing will eventually reopen. After all, it had been on a statewide improvement list. It's still on there as a project ready for funding, costing around $400,000. It would install lights and gates, along with making roadway improvements.
We expect everybody to work together, be it the railroad or the community, whoever it takes, MoDOT.
But Spencer's not confident about a path toward progress because of this frustrating road. He's been down before.
I'm not going to hold my breath waiting for this crossing to get repaired.
Would it surprise you if they just kept it closed indefinitely?
It would surprise me if they fixed it, I'll put it that way.
I checked in with MoDOT about the crossing. They say it's up to the railroad company, BNSF, and Sheraton County to agree on a plan. Once that happens, the agency works with them to finalize the plan, including how it would be paid for. Now, MoDOT would not agree to a possible interview until after the budget is signed by the governor. Now, if it's ultimately decided the crossing would remain closed, those improvements would never happen. I tried to get more information from the county's presiding commissioner, but he never responded to my nearly 24 text messages, emails, and phone calls over the last year. The only time he spoke with me was in the days right after the crash. As for BNSF, they also did not respond about the future of the crossing. For the KSHB 41I team, I'm Cameron Taylor.
Coming up.
The hero's tag was something that they certainly still, I don't think that they would be able to, say, gosh, yeah, we did anything extraordinary, but they did.
On that train that evening were a group of Boy Scouts. 1 year ago, I was with Sarah Birkin, one of the many anxious parents who was working to get their sons back to Wisconsin after that terrible crash. She told me it's been a year of healing, but doesn't want her son Isaac to forget the amazing work he's done.
I very vividly remember, the day and the, moments when we found out.
Sarah Birkin said just the sound of a train, any train, takes her back.
I mean, that's the first thing that comes to mind.
When she waited anxiously with other Boy Scout parents working to get their sons back home to Wisconsin.
What do you mean the train has crashed? And not being able to get a hold of him was very, very tense moment and moments because we didn't hear from him for about an hour. We were just, determined to get to our boys.
2 days later, Sarah's son Isaac and his friends returned home into the arms of proud parents. I was working up in Green Bay then.
But on Monday, they were on that train that derailed.
That's when I first talked to Sarah.
It was definitely the probably one of the worst moments of my life.
The boys came home with some bumps, bruises, and a tremendous sense of responsibility.
I think all of the boys grew in terms of just their maturity and probably some confidence in the fact that, wow, we helped out and we did what we were able to do.
I just knew what to do.
The Boy Scouts talked about the incident on national news, but downplayed their role.
So yeah, the hero's tag was something that they certainly still, I don't think that they would be able to, say, gosh, yeah, we did anything extraordinary, but they did, and they did a good job with it.
1 year later, Sarah said the boys don't talk about it much.
He's doing good. I think most of the boys are.
But 20 years into the future, she wants Isaac to remember how courageous he was.
There were newspaper articles, there were obviously TV interviews, and we've tried to capture, as much as we can and preserve as much as we can because that's part of Isaac's history.
That was Caroline Hogan reporting. Thank you for joining us. You can find all of our complete coverage of the deadly Mendon train derailment in one place, KSHB.com. I'm Kevin Holmes. Good night.